You're sitting there with your book open, and you've been on the same page for like 15 minutes, and you're not even distracted. You're actually trying. So you read it, you get to the end, and immediately, nothing. Like your brain just refused to save the file. So you read it again. This time you highlight stuff. You even write a little note in the margin like that's going to help. 5 minutes later, same thing. Gone. And there's this moment where you just sit back and think, am I actually stupid? Like, is my brain just broken? Because meanwhile, you saw this thing about Navy SEALs learning entire languages in like 6 months, memorizing maps, retaining operational details under actual stress, and you can't even remember what you read seconds ago. So what's the difference? Are they just better? Born with some kind of memory upgrade? No, they just learned differently than you did. And once you understand what they're actually doing, it's almost annoyingly simple. So when you study, what do? You read the chapter, you make some notes, you highlight the important parts. Maybe if you're really organized, you make flashcards or whatever, and it feels like you're working, like you're being productive and doing the hard work. But here's the problem. Your brain doesn't store information just because you looked at it a bunch of times. That's not how memory works. Your brain stores things when it thinks you're actually going to need them. And the way it decides that isn't through repetition. It's through retrieval. When you read something 5 times, your brain takes it as a signal that the information is always here and does not need to remember it because it's right in front of me. But when you read it once, close the book and try to remember it, and you can't, struggling to pull it out of your head, that's when your brain goes, oh damn, we needed this and it wasn't there. Better lock it in. The struggle is the signal. Navy SEALs don't review stuff. They test themselves on it immediately, before it feels comfortable. They force their brain to retrieve, and that's what makes it stick. That's it. That's the whole trick. You might even close the video right now, but stick around, because what comes next matters more than the method itself. And most people miss it. Testing yourself is boring, I get it, because when you review your notes, everything seems familiar, like you don't even need to study anymore. But when you close the notes and try to actually remember, you got nothing. And it feels like failure. So most people avoid it. They'd rather reread 10 times because at least that feels productive. But feeling productive and actually learning are not the same thing. There's this whole method called active recall. It just means stop passively reviewing and start actively testing. And the Navy has been doing this forever. Not because it's fun, because it's the only thing that works when you're in a high-pressure situation and you need your brain to actually perform. They train people in something called stress inoculation, which is just a fancy way of saying learn it under shitty conditions so it's easier under normal ones. You study in silence, perfect lighting, no distractions. Then the moment there's pressure, your brain freezes. They do the opposite, loud environments, time limits, distractions. Because if you can recall something when everything's chaotic, recalling it in a quiet room is easy. You've been training your brain in easy mode and expecting it to perform in hard mode. It doesn't work like that. There are 2 types of people. Some people study for hours, they grind, they feel exhausted, and a week later they've forgotten everything. They think, I'm just not good at this. Other people study way less, but they test themselves constantly. They make it hard on purpose, and months later they still remember, all because they used active recall method. First group is optimizing for effort. Second group is optimizing for results. And the crazy part? The second group doesn't even feel like they're working as hard because they're not rereading the same stuff again and again. While what we have talked about is important, it's not nearly as important as the change that happens inside of your brain. When you keep forgetting things and the information just doesn't stick, you start telling yourself a story. I'm not smart. There's something wrong with my brain. And you spiral and lose confidence in your ability to do things, and now it is not only affecting your study, but this unbelief slowly leaches into other areas of your life. And that story becomes who you are. It affects what you try, what you avoid, what you think you're capable of. But here's what actually happened. You weren't bad at learning. You were just using a bad system, a system that schools taught you because it's easy to grade, not because it actually works. And you mistook the failure of the system for a failure of yourself. That's the real damage. Not that you forgot some biology terms, but that you started believing you were the problem. You weren't. And the moment that clicks, everything shifts, because now you're not trying to fix yourself. You're just switching methods, and that you can control. Think about it for a second. All the stuff you tried to learn and quit. The language app you used for 2 weeks. The certification course you started. How much of that was actually you being incapable? And how much of it was the failure of the method? What if someone had told you this 5 years ago? How many things would you know by now? Look, I'm not saying that to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because you still have time. You can still learn those things. You just need a different approach. Here's what you actually do. Pick something you're trying to learn right now. Anything. Could be for school, work, personal interest. Doesn't matter. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb and study it for 10 minutes. That's it. Just 10. Do it for 5 if 10 minutes feels heavy. Read it, watch a video, whatever. But actually focus for those 10 minutes. Then close everything, pick up a paper and a pen, and write down everything you remember. Now most of you are going to struggle. You're going to forget most of it. Good. That's actually the point. The goal isn't to get it all right. The goal is to make your brain work to retrieve it. After you've written what you can, then go back and check. Just notice the gaps. Then, and this is important, wait a day. Next day, before you review anything, try to recall it again. See what stuck, see what didn't, then fill in the gaps again. That's the protocol. That's what actually works. First time you do this, it's going to feel awful. You'll recall like 30%. You'll think, this is a waste of time. I should just be reviewing. Nope, stick with it. After a week of doing this, you'll start noticing something. The recall gets easier, the gaps get smaller, and more importantly, the stuff actually stays. Not because you reviewed it 100 times, but because you forced your brain to work for it. After about a week of doing this, you will notice that when you want to recall something, this time it's actually there. Not all of it, but more than before. And that little win sends a positive signal of confidence to your brain. Your confidence grows, and you stop seeing yourself as someone who's just bad at learning. And that one thought changes everything. Because now when you see something hard, you don't immediately think, I can't do that. You think, I just haven't learned that yet. And every time you do this, you're not just learning the material. You're teaching your brain how to perform under pressure and show up when it actually matters. Most people's brains shut down the moment things get stressful. Their mind just goes blank. They freeze because they never practiced thinking under stress. They studied in perfect silence and perfect conditions, and then expected their brain to perform when everything's chaotic. You're doing the opposite. You're training your brain in discomfort, in difficulty. So when the real moment comes, when you actually need to think clearly and you don't have time to Google, your brain doesn't panic, it just shows up. That's a skill most people never build, and it's the difference between freezing and executing. Most hard things in life are hard for the same reason, not because you can't do them, but because nobody taught you how. School didn't teach you how to actually learn, how to handle pressure. They just told you to study. And when that didn't work, they told you to try harder. But now you know the truth. You're not broken. You're not slow. You don't have a bad memory. You were just using a broken system. And you mistook the failure of the system for a failure of yourself. Make it hard early so it's easy later. That's the whole game. You don't need a genius brain. You don't need an expensive program. You just need to close the book and see what you remember. Do that consistently, and 6 months from now, you're not going to recognize yourself. You'll look back at the person who couldn't remember a single page and think, how was that ever me? Not because you worked harder, because you worked right.